There's a lot of talk about this in the health and wellness space these days, having fiber for the microbiome, having fermented foods. Do you feel like we need to have those two categories specifically to maintain a healthy microbiome? And then expand upon that and how you feel about the microbiome as a whole.
Yeah, so there are a lot of trends in the health world that are not really based on much substance, but the focus on the microbiome is absolutely not one of those trends. There's just an overwhelming amount of research that's been done in the past, 20, 30 years that links the health of the gut microbiome to virtually every system of the body. And I do believe that it's probably one of the key factors that determines our health, that protects us and prevents chronic disease, and that actually even determines our health span, how long we not only how long we live, but how many healthy years we live, which is what most people are concerned about. And unfortunately, there are numerous factors that are antithetical to the health of our gut in the modern world. So these start from very early on, even when we're in utero. Some of the choices that our mom may have made when we were in utero could have affected our gut health, like if she had to take antibiotics. That's usually not a choice, but if she was prescribed antibiotics, that could actually impact the gut flora of the developing baby. A C-section birth, for example, will change the development of the baby's gut microbiome. Being formula fed versus breastfed will change the development of the microbiome. Then during early childhood, how long the infant is breastfed for, what their first foods are, what their diet is like at an early age, how many courses of antibiotics they took as a child, other medications, exposure to environmental toxins. And then as you grow up, all of those same factors remain relevant, but then there are new factors like other medications that you might take, like hormonal birth control for women, alters the gut microbiome. Drugs like metformin for blood sugar alter the gut microbiome. Ibuprofen and NSAIDs alter the microbiome. Chronic stress alters the microbiome. A lack of exercise and sedentary behavior alters the microbiome. It's like we live in an environment now that's so different than what we lived in, for most of our evolutionary history. And many of these different factors have a negative or adverse effect on the microbiome. And then that leads in turn to inflammation in the gut, intestinal permeability, which is colloquially known as leaky gut. And then we can get proteins and other compounds like lipopolysaccharides or endotoxins from bacteria that escape the gut lining and get into the bloodstream and provoke a systemic inflammatory response. And we know that chronic inflammation is a significant contributor, if not the primary driver, to a lot of complex chronic modern diseases, from cardiovascular disease to metabolic syndrome to dementia and Alzheimer's. So it's really hard to overemphasize the importance of the microbiome to human health and well-being. And this has always been a major focus for me in my clinical practice. And it's a major focus of how I think about supplementation and formulating supplements, diet, everything. So yes, it's huge.
This right here is my favorite protein powder, the 100% grass-fed bone broth protein from Paleo Valley. It comes in 3 flavors, unflavored, chocolate, and vanilla. The chocolate and vanilla you can just mix with water. They taste incredible just like that. And I like to take the unflavored, scoop it in my black coffee, mix it in. I barely taste it, but I'm getting that collagen and protein boost. These protein powders have been third-party tested for over 40 different herbicides and pesticides. They've come back negative. There's no chemicals or solvents used in the processing, just water. As a viewer of the show, click the link in the description to save 15% off this protein today. Again, this is my favorite protein. I know you're gonna love it. Well, how do you think about it from the perspective of including extra fiber, fermented foods, and then the other way around, things that we might be eating that have a negative impact on the microbiome?
Yeah, so a gut microbiome healthy diet would be one with very similar to what I just mentioned for a nutrient dense diet. with some additions and nuances. One is that there are foods that nourish us and that we absorb very well and are good for us that don't necessarily support our microbiome. So like animal proteins would be a good example. There's very little fiber in meat or fish, and the fermentable fibers in foods are what our gut microbacteria metabolize and convert into all of the beneficial substances that we need, like short chain fatty acids. So, and conversely, some of the foods that really feed our beneficial bacteria are not especially nutrient dense for us, and legumes would be a good example of this. So, going back to and even some whole grain products, but if we go back to the nutrient density scale that from the Ty Beal study that I've talked about a few times, the first appearance of legumes you see is about midway down the scale. Their score was 667. Again, livers was 11. So very big difference in nutrient density there. But again, what that scale doesn't tell you is that the fermentable fiber in legumes is actually very beneficial for the gut bacteria. So even though we don't absorb fiber and we can't utilize it for nutrition, the beneficial bacteria in our gut do. And so we may still want to include foods that are higher in fermentable fiber, even though they don't necessarily meet our nutrition needs. So it's like when you're thinking about what food you put in your mouth, you can think about it from, is this the two different perspectives? Like, is this going to nourish my health? And is it going to nourish the health of the gut, the trillions of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other microbes that I harbor in my gut?
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
Most recent research suggests that over 90% of Americans fall short of the optimal intake of not just one, but several micronutrients. This is also true in other developed countries around the world. So there definitely has been a